Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. Why is this guy up my ass, man? It's not a race. So I'm here in Frederick, Maryland, just going home. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things because they kind of came up, and also, just like what things are going on in the trucking industry. So I want to talk about two things that kind of pertain to trucks. So maybe it was my last video, but I talked about Richie Rich talking about the guy that shot at the trucker from Swift who shot at another trucker and then was hunted down by the police and killed at the Loves on I-77, just like right by the Virginia-North Carolina border. So one of the things I said was, hey, when you have a gun in the truck, and let me preface this by saying, I did go to law school. I've passed more than one bar exam. I practiced law for a bunch of years, but I'm not a criminal attorney. And I have owned guns, lots of them at times. And then, my life kind of changed, and so I don't own guns anymore. But I don't hate guns. I do think there's a lot of people that are stupid that own guns. I think guns get into the hands of wrong people. And if you disagree with that, I'm not sure what to say. But anyway, but one of the things, it's kind of an inside joke in my life with my wife, and our joke is that on my tombstone it'll say, "Here lies a pragmatic man." And if you don't know the word pragmatic, it means practical. In other words, I know what the law is. I know how things work. I know, I know things. I don't know everything. I also know enough to know when I don't know something. But it's like, there was a guy, when I was in the Navy, right? There was, I was in a helicopter squadron in Norfolk at the air station, the Norfolk Naval Air Station. And I remember there was this crosswalk that went across this main thoroughfare that went through the base, across the base. And at that crosswalk, it said, vehicles must stop for pedestrians. And that went from like where the hangars were to across the road. There was a parking lot where a lot of people parked. I didn't park there because even though I was in this squadron, I was in this tactical support unit, and we had a different facility. So if we needed to go to the hangar, we'd just drive over there because it was like a mile away. And so anyway, this dude that I knew, he was coming to work one morning, and it was dark out, and he just, walked into the crosswalk because pedestrians have the right of way. And bam, some other sailor runs him over. Now, fortunately, the speed limit was low there, and when I say he got run over, he didn't really get run over, but he did get his arm and shoulder totally broken. And, and I said, what happened? He's like, oh, well, I stepped in a crosswalk and this dude hit me. And so while it's true that this guy that I know had the right of way, in other words, he had the law on his side, it's also true that as a practical matter, stepping out in front of a car, no matter how impressive the law is that supposedly protects you, is not going to change the outcome. Okay? And so I share that with you as a way of illustrating things. So I made my comments about, people having guns in the truck, and I kind of was like riffing on the fact that Richie Rich said, hey, sticks and stones will break my bones, words will never hurt me, walk away, don't wreck your life for a moment of anger. And I totally concur with all of that. But I said that even further, you can get in a pretty big pickle. And when I say pretty big pickle, I'm talking about basically ruining your life if you're not paying attention to what gun laws are and stuff like that. And somebody made a comment, they're like, oh, well, you know, FOPA, F-O-P-A, the Firearms Owner Protection Act, which frankly I had never heard of, even though it became law in 1986 when I used to have a lot of guns. He's like, that protects people that are transporting firearms. So I was like, all right, let me look at this law. Well, here's the deal, okay? I don't think that somebody with a gun in the cab of their tractor trailer is, quote, transporting. But maybe they are. I don't know. And by the way, the law says there's a whole bunch of people, and you might want to read the list if you've ever been in trouble for any reason. A whole bunch of people are excluded from the benefits or protections from prosecution under this law. A whole group of people. Like if somebody has a protective order against you, your ex-wife has a protective order against you, you're probably excluded from that law. So you could not count on the federal law to supersede state law when it comes to a gun. But I'll leave that up to you. What we used to call people in the Navy, we called them sea lawyers. But I'll leave that up to you road lawyers. But here's the other thing, and this gets back to my pragmatism, right? And that is this. You know, I've documented, or like, I don't know, documented is not a right word. I've publicized that lots of truckers end up in jail because they do stupid things with guns. Now, the guy that Richie Rich was talking about, he didn't end up in jail, he just ended up in the morgue. But lots of people do stupid things with guns that are truck drivers, and they end up in jail. So here's the thing. I'm not sure that the Nebraska State Police are, and I'm picking a state that I think has pretty liberal gun laws, but I don't think if they find you with a loaded firearm, they're going to be okay with it. And FOPA is not going to protect you because some of the provisions of the law are that it's unloaded, the ammunition and firearm are separate, and it's not accessible. I don't know, so I am not giving legal advice here, but just my little reading of it and my understanding of words tells me that I don't know how you make the case that it's not accessible if it's in a place where because a lot of times accessibility has to do with the fact that you would have to like get out of the vehicle, or you would have to do several things in order to get to the firearm. But as a guy who used to own guns, and I've owned several auto loaders over the years, including Beretta and CZ75, and I don't even know what else. Plus I had revolvers. I had a 44 Magnum back in the day. But like, I could, if some trooper pulls me over, I could stop the truck, get up, get my magazine out of one compartment in my truck, get my firearm out of the other, load it, rack around before that trooper gets up to my door. So you ask yourself this: is that cop gonna think that's okay? Am I gonna have a defense at FOPA? And here's the thing: supposing for a moment that FOPA is my get out of jail free card. Well, guess what? I went to jail. No trucking if you get arrested, I can't think of a trucking company that's gonna be like, yeah, you're good. And especially if you have a firearm and it's against their policy, right? So, and here's the other thing I've told people, and I've said this before. If you get arrested and you don't qualify for a public defender, and by the way, that is a thing, you don't qualify for a public defender, it's going to cost you $10,000 to get a lawyer. And if you end up doing a year in jail because FOPA didn't bail you out, because you weren't eligible for the protections that Congress intended under the act, as we would say, then I was just thinking about this. I can't imagine that phone call, right? Like a dude's married, he's got 3 kids, he's paying a mortgage, he's paying for his monster car crushing pickup truck and his wife's SUV and his RV and the dirt bike he has and the ATV he has. And then he makes this call. Hey, I got arrested, or hey, I had this trial and I'm going to be busy for the next 24 to 64 months. And even if you're like, this guy's going to get out, in 8 months. I mean, unless you had a lot of money saved up, there's going to be problems. If you're like, hey, honey, our joint savings account has $100,000 in it, you'll be able to make the payments on all the stuff that my normal $80,000 a year job is making. That's not a conversation I would want to have, and I am very confident that it will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you're going to go a year without working, or whatever it is, right? Then you're going to have to try to find a job as a convicted felon. And, it's just no bueno. And ask yourself, if you are transporting a weapon in accordance with FOPA, how much good does that do you? I don't know. I mean, if somebody gets the drop on you, what good does it really do you? And so if you say, well, that's why I keep it loaded and keep it right beside me, then you're in violation of FOPA. That's not your get out of. So then you got to hope that you're not in violation of any state law. But my experience, my knowledge, not my personal experience, but my knowledge is, if you got a gun in a lot of states, it doesn't matter the state. They're at least going to take you into custody. And I'm not saying you're going to be booked for anything, but they're going to run checks all up and down you. They're going to run checks on that weapon. They're going to do a lot of stuff. I just don't see the point. I mean, I don't want somebody to kill me because they get mad at me, but I'm not willing to shoot at somebody or brandish a firearm because they cut me off. I get cut off every single day. And if you drive a truck, you probably do too. I can't imagine somebody needing to merge, or me needing to merge, and that resulting in gunplay of any kind, let alone discharging a firearm towards somebody and then getting hunted down by the cops. But so again, Terry the pragmatist is like, it doesn't matter if you think the law's on your side. If you get cuffed and stuffed, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. And guess what? Nobody gets their lawyer's fees refunded even when they're completely innocent. That's not our system of justice. It sucks, but it's not our system of justice. You get put in a police car, you get booked, fingerprinted, you're gonna need a bunch of money. You're gonna need lawyers, guns, and money. Or not guns, but you're gonna need lawyers and money, to paraphrase Warren Zevon. So, Hank Jr. too covered that song. But, yeah. So, that life's all about, like I tell my kids, life's all about choices and consequences. And every choice has a consequence. So I don't know if this is going to keep anybody out of jail. Hopefully it makes people think a little bit more about this issue. And I get it. It's scary out here in the real world. But, if like I used to go to a bar and they used to sell these t-shirts and the t-shirt showed like a sailing ship. And it said, if you can't hack it, get your life jacket. And, you know, maybe if you're too scared to just run these roads, find something that's you think is a more peaceful occupation where, or, you know, just decide, hey, I'm gonna try not to get in circumstances. And I get that there's some crazy MFs out here. I get that. But that's true. You know, it's like, it's true for the people that went to that Walmart in El Paso and died because some guy wanted to go shoot people. You know, it's crazy out here for those kids at and I'm not picking on Texas. This happens everywhere. Happened at Florida State yesterday. I think there was a shooting. You know, it happened to those kids in Uvalde. Some crazy MF decides to get a weapon and hurt a bunch of people. The anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting just was, I don't know, this past week. So I get it. But I also get that I don't want to, you know, have, and I get angry enough. I mean, honestly, there are people that piss me off to the point where I'm just like, you know, I want them dead. Now, am I going to do anything about that? No. But you know, if you want someone dead and you got a gun, it might be easier to act on that. And I'm just a student of human nature. You know, I'm just a student of human nature. And I've been around for 62 plus years, and I've seen a lot of human nature. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people that have gone to jail that are not bad people. They just did something bad. So enough about that. So today, and this was interesting, totally shifting gears here. Today, the stock market is closed for an observation of, well, I guess Good Friday, but it's Easter weekend, right? CSX, I saw a headline, CSX said their, I don't know if they said their profits or their forecast is down 27%. And I'm sure their stock is going to crack the bed on Monday. But it's not just going to be CSX. It's going to be Norfolk Southern stock is going to do that. UP's, BNSF, CPKC, and Canadian National, CN. All their stocks are going to go down precipitously on Monday. And it's because of the tariffs. But here's the thing that concerns me about the trucking industry. And I'm saying that I don't think it would impact me. Although I do think if the economy is not doing well, it will impact the customer of my company, and that could impact me. If Trex is like, hey, we don't need as much sawdust, right? Although maybe my company would be in a better position because we haul the vast majority of the sawdust that they're getting. But so maybe some of the smaller carriers would be the first ones to go. I don't know. But here's the thing. Railroads have been around for a long, long, long time. Like Norfolk Southern Corp, CSX, even BNSF, right? Those are all amalgamations of other railroads that were around for a long time. UP is also an amalgamation, but they never changed their name. But UP has been around since the 1860s, okay? And they're not going anywhere. They've survived everything. Multiple world wars, the Great Depression, a gazillion recessions, all sorts of craziness. UP has survived, been around for four presidential assassinations. Everything that you can imagine that's crazy, UP has been around for. At least in the United States. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, when you see an intermodal train, and when I say intermodal, I mean a train that has containers on it, right? Boxes. And sometimes actual trailers, like You'll see pups, you'll see 53 footers, whatever. Chassis with, every once in a while they ship a chassis. Excuse me. When you see those, what you are seeing a lot of times, if you don't really know the difference, sometimes you're seeing domestic container shipments. So when you see a UP train with 160 orange boxes, that's all a Schneider National load, right? Because Schneider has a contract with UP. JB Hunt has a contract with BNSF. So you're coming across New Mexico and you see a train go by with 200 JB Hunt trailers. That's a domestic shipment, okay? That's moving from A to B in the United States, typically. There are some ships that will carry 53-foot containers, but the ocean-going containers are typically 40 and 20 feet long. So when you see 40-foot trailers that say, like MSC, which is Mediterranean shipping, right? When you see Maersk, when you see China shipping, when you see any of those like international, you see pink trailers or pink containers that say 1 on them, which stands for Ocean Network Express. Those are all boxes that came on a ship to a port somewhere, whether it's the port of Los Angeles, Jacksonville, doesn't matter, right? You get the picture. Okay, so the railroads, and the railroads transport other stuff, obviously, like coal. They move a lot of agricultural product in this country. They have automobiles. They move a lot of stuff, but their container business from overseas shipments, those 40 and 20 foot boxes I was talking about, that's taking a huge hit because that's a huge part of their revenue, right? And the container shipments are easier to deal with than, say, grain. Putting a grain, like you might see a unit grain train that's 100 cars long. That train took a lot longer to put together than did a 100-car intermodal train. I mean, they'll load an intermodal train in just hours. So the margins on those loads are typically pretty good. But what's going to happen is a lot of these ocean containers are not going to show up on our shores. They're not going to come into Oakland or, Tacoma or Los Angeles or Houston or wherever, right? So what are the railroads going to do? Well, like I said, the railroads are survivors. And what many of you may not realize is that it is extraordinarily less expensive to ship on rail. So if you run cargo with your truck that can be shipped on rail, and it's cargo that's not super time sensitive, you may see shippers shifting to rail for a couple reasons. One is, the first one I just mentioned, is cost. Significantly lower cost, like 90% lower in some cases, right? Now, trains take longer, but if it's not time sensitive cargo, and that could include refrigerated, because even though JB Hunt was never really known as a reefer trucking company, if you pay attention to their boxes moving across this country, you see a lot of them are reefer boxes, okay? A lot of them. And there are a lot of trucking companies, England is big, KLLM is big, and Prime is kind of, Johnny come lately, but they ship a fair amount of refrigerated. But here's the thing. In addition to the cost savings, if time is not an issue, and again, even with like refrigerated loads, time is not always an issue. If it's frozen, about the only refrigerated loads I think that are time sensitive, truly time sensitive, are produce, fresh produce, flowers, and some meat, right? But even fresh meat is a little less time sensitive. And then if it was like I took a load of pig's feet from South Dakota to the port of Philadelphia one time. Obviously not time sensitive because they put that shit on a ship. Okay. And it went to China actually. But the other thing, the other factor besides cost is that what was I going to say? So there's cost is one factor, and the other factor is my mind went blank. It happens. I'm old enough for this to happen. Cost, time sensitive, and I'll just keep talking because maybe it'll come to me. So, and part of the cost obviously is all that cost, right? Driver costs, fuel costs, all that stuff. It reduces the liability, right? Because if think about it, right? And that's a part of cost too. Man, I'm kind of embarrassed. I had this other thing. Oh, I know. The other thing, though, is because of the time sensitivity, one of the reasons that the dwell time for railroad cars generally is so high is because of capacity. In other words, there's more stuff moving than the railroads can handle at any given time. But because of the fact that, say, UP or BNSF at those West Coast ports, and CPKC down in the Gulf, and CSX and Norfolk Southern on the East Coast, one of the reasons they can get boxes moved quicker now, domestic boxes, is because they don't have to worry about I say worry, they want to worry about it, but they don't have as much seagoing cargo to move. Because those shippers want their stuff moved in a hurry too. So it's the time is probably shortened just because of the reduction in traffic in other areas. And so for shippers, a lot of time, like maybe shippers were needing to pay, I don't know, let's say a box was costing them 18 cents a mile, and it was taking 8 days to get it across the country, or let's say 16 days, and they're like, yeah, we got to put this on a truck. The customer doesn't want to wait that long. Well, now if the shipping cost is only 8 cents a mile for that box, that 53 footer, and it can get there in 8 days, in other words, half the time, that's a huge cost savings over paying 80 cents a mile to run it. So that shipper and receiver will be like, hey, we're saving so much money, we'll wait 3 extra days for it, or whatever. So that's one of the concerns I have for my colleagues in this industry, in the trucking industrial complex, is that the rails there's gonna be a lot of freed up space, and UP and all those other railroads, they want to run just like we do. And so keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on container stuff, and here's the other thing that you may not know if you're not like a rail fan dork like me, is it's not just cargo that's moving coast to coast. There's a lot of, like for instance, CSX, yeah, they have a huge intermodal hub in Worcester, Massachusetts, for example. So it runs into the Northeast. But they also have a huge intermodal hub in North Baltimore, Ohio. And you could put a container on in North Baltimore and just get it taken to, Denver. Like, it doesn't have to be coast to coast. And so it really is something to pay attention to. So anyway, I hope you found this information useful. Happy to get comments and and feedback. And be safe. Have a good Easter weekend, and I'll talk to you when I come out next week. Bye.